Right. So last week we were discussing about this national income, right? National income and the circular flow model. So there we studied, I'll give you a small briefing, right? So the circular flow model included this, right? National income, consumption, whatever the symbols. And then basically we started discussing about a very simple economy where only households and firms were there. So whatever the income earned by the households were totally 100% spent on the firms once again through consumption. So this was like a very simple economy. Then afterwards we understood, so in the simple economy, consumption was equal to income because only two parties, households and the firms. Then expenditure was equal to income, then everything. Then we studied about injections and withdrawals, right? Injections and withdrawals. So injections included GIX, which is exports, government investments and private sector investments, which is funds or money flowing inwards to an economy. Then withdrawals was money or funds moving out of the economy, which included TSM, which is taxation, savings and imports, right? So how injections and withdrawals do help in the economy, this was the diagram we discussed, right? Funds coming in and funds moving out of the economy. Then we understood that there were several, right? Then this equilibrium, just like we discussed, on an individual product level, we understood the demand and the supply should be equivalent to reach the equilibrium. And then in the national income level, at the national level also, planned injections and the planned withdrawals should be equal if that is to be in equilibrium, which is just like in a simple economy where income and the expenditure was equal, income and the consumption was equal. For that to happen, I clearly explained that all these 6 factors should nullify. So accordingly, withdrawals should be equal to injections if that is to be in equilibrium that we discussed. Then, so we went on discussing about, I think, each and every factor, right? Each and every factor, consumption, what are the factors affecting, investment, what are the factors affecting, savings and everything. I think I gave a proper explanation. Then we went on accelerator. Did we discuss? Okay. We'll go to accelerator. Right. So these are the factors including, so these factors, right? These factors you need to keep in your mind. What are the factors affecting investments? What are the factors affecting consumption? And what are the factors affecting savings and everything? Thanks. Right. Okay, here. Then we stopped here. Linkages between different elements. Right now, how many elements do you have? How many elements do you have? Yes. Injections 3, withdrawals 3, altogether 6 components we have which should affect the national income. So the linkage between these elements, the first two, there are 2 basic linkages. First, we thought of studying about the accelerator. So for growth to occur, the economy has to be able to increase the output of goods and services unless spare capacity exists. So what was this spare capacity in an economy? Yes. So there can be manufacturers or producers where all these producers are not producing up to the maximum potential, not all the time. So imagine if there is a vehicle manufacturer in a country like Japan, imagine Toyota. They might be having this kind of a potential, but do they produce? No. They will match the market demand. They will produce only for that, because for the very reason, resources are limited and they don't want extra demand. Clear? So as a result, spare capacity, unless spare capacity exists, where national producers are not running their factories at full capacity, this will require additional investment in capital goods. Right? So if you have spare capacity, imagine your company can manufacture 1,000 units whereas you manufacture only 750. So there's a spare capacity clearly. But to match this, what do you need? You need factors of production, right? You need labor to run the factory. You need raw materials for that, right? All the four factors of production. So failure to increase output at a time of a rising demand would simply result in inflation, money chasing the same amount of goods and increase in imports. What do you mean by that? Imagine the number of items coming out, the output is kept at the same level, right? Think of a bit example. So when you're like interpreting all these complex stuff, always like think about an example. Imagine the output remains the same. Output remains the same due to some reason or the other, demand increases. What would happen to the price? What would happen to the price, guys? Think demand remained the same. Sorry, output remained the same. Output remained the same, but the demand for it increases. Good example during the COVID-19 time, demand for the masks, right? So whatever the output which they were manufacturing remained the same, but ultimately at once there came a huge demand. So what happened? Price increase. A simple mask was like just 1 rupee, 2 rupee, but it was sold for 50 rupees even. Just a single. So price increases. The accelerator principle views investment as a function of changes in national income. So to add something, that price increase, we call it what? Inflation. General increase in price level. So if the output remains the same and the demand increases, that will lead to inflation. Simply price increase. Accelerator principle views investment as a function of changes in national income. As national income rises and desired consumption increases, firms respond, investing in new capital goods. So that part is important. You may, I like to do whatever on that and keep the process. Accelerator principle views investment as a function of changes. Now we know several factors, now we know several components. Imagine investment increases, right? Think whatever the company, investment to this company, investment to this industry increases. So what are the changes that would happen afterwards? So when investment increases, right, ultimately national income increases. Now we understood in the individual context, when person's income increased, what happened to the demand? Income. Factors affecting demand, go back and see, income is one main factor. So if I have a good, imagine my salary is 50,000 this month and 150,000 next month. So I'll tend to spend, right? I'll tend to purchase a lot of things and do some other stuff as well. So national income increases, desired consumption increases. What will happen? When the national income increases, when the income level of everybody increases, at the same time, parallelly, consumption also increases. Right? People tend to spend, people tend to consume. Right? So you had parties once a week. If your salary enhances, twice a week. Maybe thrice a week. You know what the product is. Right? So national income rises and the desired consumption increases. So when consumption increases, what will happen to the producers or suppliers or manufacturers? They will have to increase that as well. Clear? They will have to increase the production or manufacturing or whatever to meet the demand. So by that, firms will respond investing in new capital goods to meet extra demand. This in turn increases aggregate demand further. Now, firstly, what happened was national income came up, increased. So as a result, consumption increases. As a result, firms started producing more and more. So the pressure towards the firms is produce more and more. They need further investment. Now imagine producing 1,000 units, the demand is 2,000 units. So they will have to come up with another factory, another set of laborers, right? Jobs created. Ultimately, aggregate demand, the total of the demands altogether, the aggregate demand, what will happen to that? Further increase. So this is known as the accelerator. Just a small push, investments making into the industry, national income levels increase drastically. So this turn keeps on going, accelerator effect keeps on going. So how can you control it? So we can keep it like that. We can let the companies accelerate and keep. Do we keep like that? Any industry? Who controls this? Who controls? Government controls. Government and the central bank definitely can control. Right? This national income levels. National income, who can control? The government. How? Asking, just keep your income and don't spend. Is it? How do governments control our national income? Taxation. When the national income is gradually increasing, they will raise the taxes. Right? So when they raise the taxes, you can't go and consume, you earn, pay the tax. Understood? This whole structure logically? Right. Then, thus when an economy starts to grow, this in itself can fuel further growth. Important. When an economy starts growing, right? So, there are two messages. Let me see. Thanks. Normally, I'm not good with messages, no? Can see? Okay. So, learning about economy, you are living in the best time ever in our island nation. We experience all kinds of practical. It's like doing a science class to me. I explain all the economic stuff right here. When you go and switch on the TV next time, you see the entire thing practical. Right? So economy, our economy, it's so glad to say, right? So glad to say. So Bloomberg, they have confirmed that we are running ahead of our economic growth. That's pretty good. What happened to our economy back in the day, 2029? You are not born, you can't say. Right? 2029, Easter Sunday bomb attacks, COVID, economic downturn. 19 years. 2019. 19, 20, 21, 22, likewise. Okay. So economy fell into very bad levels. But we are recovering. We are recovering. All the global giants like the IMF and the World Bank expected for us to come to the normal levels by 2028. But now we are gradually recovering. This is one reason. When an economy starts growing, it fuels itself, right? It fuels itself. So leave everything aside. Tell me what are the changes we did to have this economic growth? If I ask you, theoretically, I'll explain definitely. What are the changes we did? Increased taxation is one thing. Yes. Apart from that, yeah, import restrictions controlled. Yes. Again, reduced. Consumption was reduced. Okay. You mean we had times where like hours of electricity loss was there. You think that the government did it? Okay. Right. Yes. Yes. What else? What about inflation? Inflation, if we are to grow, we need to keep inflation at lower levels or higher levels? Lower levels. Then higher levels. Why? Practical stuff. Huh? So everything I'll be explaining, but before that. Yeah. So true. What he says is true, but being in a recessionary period where our like economy is hitting the bottom, we should maintain inflation at very low levels. Right? So in that sense, we don't have to think about, we do have to, but We are not prioritizing the supply end. We are prioritizing the demand end. If we prioritize the supply end, there will be no demand no anyway. So we maintained the inflation levels. Then that's one thing we did. We maintained our inflation very close to zero. It's almost 3.445 range. That's what we did. Right? So all these things will lead to what? Economic growth. Right? That will lead to economic growth. So these are practical. So listen to all these things, right? And understand. Practically, you are getting practically. Learn theory here, go home, practical. Right? So you are so lucky in that sense. Unfortunately, the reverse is also the true. What does that mean? So this is having an accelerator effect where you are like starting to grow. If the economy starts to grow, it's on an accelerating effect, right? But just like that, unfortunately, if the reverse happens, if the economy goes to go down, okay, right. So this was about reduction of the economy will result in a cut in investments, accelerate. Okay, then the next part, multiplier. This idea shows the change in national income. Now, previously, for the accelerator to happen, what's the first step which happened? National income levels increased, right? So that's why the government, right, not our government generally, that's why the government is trying to increase the standard of living of every individual. They try to give government grants to the farmers, to the rural people, everybody, every government try to, not tried, right? Try to do what? Increase the income. That's the best thing to do, right? So if you increase the income only, the consumption will parallelly increase. Then only the demand will come up, then only the industry will develop, and likewise the flow will go. Clear? Then, this idea shows the change in national income resulting from a change in planned investment, a change in government spending, or a change in overseas trade sector. It looks at the effect of injections. You may highlight it. Effect of injections, less withdrawals into the circular flow of income, multiplier. Right? Injections. So in the multiplier, in this linkage, the second one, in the multiplier, it looks at the effect of injections into the circular flow. We did that as well. As a country, to come up to economic growth up to this level, didn't we do that? Didn't we do that? We took financial aid from India. We took financial aid from China. So all those are what? All those are what? Injections. Private investments from the Adani Group, India, right? Japanese government, Chinese government. Like increasing the national income levels and increasing the money flow into the system. Now we are learning about a circular flow of funds, right? Goes like this. You looked at. So increasing injections into the circular flow of income will lead to the multiplier effect. So changes in injections, whatever, may cause a more than proportional increase in national income. This is termed as the multiplier effect, which is what, just like the accelerator. Now we increase the national income by 2 units. Aggregate demand increased by 5 units, more than proportion, right? Getting accelerated. Similarly, the multiplier effects, we injected, let's say 10 million rupees, but it creates a multiplied effect when it comes to the out. Okay. So then multiplier effects can occur in many ways. They have given examples. When any planned injection into the circular flow increases and other injections and withdrawals remain unchanged, then increased national income will lead to the use of more factors of production, earnings, and the same own story we discussed. Only thing is we are changing the national income. Clear? So thus an initial injection of additional expenditure in the flow will lead to a series of additional rounds. Where did we learn this kind of thing previously also? A multiplier. Where did we learn? I mean, during my class. Multiply effect. Credit multiplier in where? Where did credit multiplier come? Credit multiplier was there in where? Financial markets, specifically in banks. Banks are the lenders. Credit multiplier, right? So just going and depositing 100 rupees, you saw how that was multiplied into 181 or something. Remember? Another 181. So just like that, in the national economy, circular flow of funds also, that multiply effects can happen. Right? So actually, what are we learning this? In this section, domestic economy, why are we learning this? What's the point? Are we going to be in the government next time? Then you should know this. This is the macroeconomic context, right? Right? This is the macroeconomic concept. You should know this so that you can understand what's happening in the outer. So we are following, sometimes you might feel we are following a business management accounting qualification. And this bugger is teaching about all this national economy, everything, government. Why all this? Remember, in the business world, the national economy and the government and all these things plays a crucial part. Imagine you becoming a CEO of a company. You are the CEO of a company. Right? Imagine you are the CEO of, let's say, not Wisdom, it's too small for you, no? Right? Let's say John Keels anyway. Right? Let's take John Keels. You are the next in line chairman. You don't know shit about the country's economy. You don't know that we export tea. You don't know that we do whatever. You know nothing. Can you manage it? Impact to the business, can you understand? From the income? So the government is doing this and things, you say. This is the, so anyway, John Keels, this is the largest conglomerate in the country. So why do you have to care about the government? Let president do anything, let ministers do anything. I don't care. Can you behave? No, it's about the national economy. Your market is the general public. Right? So what are the taxation policies you have? What are the other monetary policy changes you have? You should be thorough enough with everything if you have to manage the company. Right? That's why, one good example, that's why sometimes there are businesses with a legacy of like 50, 60 years where the fathers do come from a scratch and bring the business up to this level. Right? Then the idiotic puta comes. Right? Next in line management. What happens to the company? Maximum 2 years, 3 years. Why? Don't know about the practical aspect. So when you come from a scratch, you know what happens in the country, what happens this and how that the impact which will be created to the company and likewise. So that's why SIMA wants you to learn economics. If not, economics is not management accounting. Completely two different sectors. Right? And that's why they have inserted another word before that. This is business economics. Right? Cheated. Business economics for you to learn. But inside this, all about it. Understood? So we are going in a journey actually, right? So it's been like 2 months. We have another 2 months to go. And this is the like lengthiest part we are completing. Right? By next week, I'm completing this domestic economy and international economy both. After that, 60% of the syllabus is done. The rest is all about this investment appraisal, index numbers, forecasting. It's about maths. After next week, it's a maths class, not economy. So this is the important part. Lot of things, lot of reading, not a single diagram. Very boring, right? At least you have me. That's not boring, right? So this will be done. Domestic economy, international economy, this is done. Then afterward, maths, interesting. But these things, hardcore logics, remember. Clear about the accelerator and the multiplier effect both, how that affects the circular flow of funds. So circular flow, firstly, there was only a simple economy, which was like households and the firms. Then the injections and the withdrawals came up. made it really complex. Not really complex, a bit complex. A really complex one, even I have given you a diagram for you to read at home. Maybe in the next eternity, you might read. That's okay. So this part, we have done about the multiplier. So determinants of the multiplier. Determinants of the multiplier. A simple economy. The increase in national income caused by successive rounds of spending will not go on forever, since with each round some extra income will be lost to the circular flow through the operation of withdrawal. That's what I say. So if you have in an economy, if you have the accelerator effect and the multiplier effect, every economy on this earth would like continue to accelerate. Would that happen? No. There are trade cycles. You saw how recessions, then a trough, then a development, then afterwards the peak. How that happens? You saw it. So every time it's not like accelerating like this, even in US. So the reason is that some of the funds during this flow of funds, some of the funds will be withdrawn. How? If you take Sri Lanka, even though you have the accelerator and the multiplier effect, what's the main withdrawal you will have to make? Apart from the part to the politicians, this thing, main withdrawal. Imports, no. Can be, but not basically. Now, we discussed about the accelerator and the multiplier by increasing the national income, right? Firstly and the secondly, using injections coming from abroad. So whatever the investments given to us by India, China and all this, don't we have to pay? We do have to pay. That's not charity, right? So when you are making such kind of huge withdrawals, those are the withdrawals. So in the flow of funds, circular flow of funds, just like investments coming in, which would create a multiplier and accelerator effect, that will be nullified. Because why? From every round of investment, you should make a withdrawal too. Every year, there is a major portion of income which is to be repaid as debt to the foreign governments. So that's why, although we, in theory, we talk about accelerator effect, that is not going in that, right? If that goes on like that, we are ahead of Singapore as well. That won't happen. Clear? Okay. Then, thus each succeeding round of spending becomes smaller and smaller. If withdrawals were 20% of income, marginal propensity to save of 0.2. You remember what marginal propensity to this thing consume was? Remember marginal propensity we discussed last week, right? So if the marginal propensity is 0.2% of income, the increases in income each round year that will be given. Round 1, you give $100. Round 2, 80. 100 minus 20, which is saved, which is paid as government debt, which is like given for imports through whatever the withdrawals. So 80 remains. Next time that becomes 64. Next time that becomes 51.2. Keeps on diminishing. Right? Keeps on diminishing because why? Because of the withdrawals out of the circular flow of funds. Understood? So, in a simple economy, the obvious withdrawal is savings. Right? When you take the very initial simple economy, the main way of withdrawals was savings. Imagine you as an individual unit, and I'm talking about the circular flow of funds of you. So you earn and you spend everything. Simple economy. Be like that. You get the monthly salary, enjoy everything, done. Right? But you are like, SEMA qualified or something like that, we'll say you're educated enough. Earn 100,000, 20,000 saved, right? 80,000 will be spent. So savings makes a withdrawal, right? In terms of your economic system. If I take you as a simple economy. So 20% taken away, withdrawal. So how much have you got to spend? 80,000. Right? So next time, again, likewise, right? So gradually getting away, withdrawals, savings. In this simple economy with no government and no external sector. So these are theoretical, right? These are theoretical. We are considering there is no government and no external sector involvement. The value of multiplier K is shown as this. MPC is marginal propensity to consume and MPS is marginal propensity to save. So marginal propensity 1 minus MPC means what you consume is after the reduction of what you save, right? So this is because there is no external sector government involved. If the government was there, I can't talk about this. Why? Taxation comes into. Clear now? So what's the relationship? K is equal to 1 minus 1 divided by 1 minus MPC. MPC means good. I thought you would say municipal council. Marginal propensity to consume. So that is equal to marginal propensity to save. 1 divided by marginal propensity to save. So simply put together, if one assumed an MPC of 0.8, which is marginal propensity to consume of 0.8, or therefore an MPS of 0.2. So out of 100, 80% consumed, which is like 20% saved. Because why? There's no any government or external sector involved, right? So there, the multiplier would have a value of 5 and increased injection of 10 million would increase the total national income by 50 million. This is important for government policy making, right? So if this is the case, consume and the savings is equal to 0.2, multiplier would be 5 and increased injection of 10 million. When you put an injection, so government can think of this, right? There's an entire dedicated department of government census and statistics, so they can decide on these factors, and central bank economic affairs section. So they will calculate this. So if the marginal propensity to save is 0.2, whatever the amount you put 5 times, that will be when it comes to the savings in the national economy. So the government, when they are making the policies, they can decide on these factors to think of, to develop. Clear enough? Right. Explaining trade cycles. What was a trade cycle? What are the 4 stages which was there in the trade cycle? Previously, I gave the diagram, right? Yes. Growth, recession, trough, peak. Trade cycle. So trade cycle was like this and this, just like a wave, right? So what are the 2 basic factors the government should try when it comes to the trade cycle? Maximize peak, okay. Specifically, if I say that, maximize peak, that's okay, that's accepted. So you should minimize the unfavorable times and maximize the favorable, right? Secondly, the overall trend should be on a increasing basis. Okay, those are the very basic 2 things the government should target on. Then explaining trade cycles, right? So all these are theory, guys. I can't actually help it. Okay, just support me. So all this information, just a matter of reading, right? So I'm like in a, after lunch, right? Saturday evening, you all are like seated like this for 3 hours, explaining this without a single diagram. If it was a subject like biology, I would have done it really well. If it was biology, because diagrams is there, I would have explained, but can't help economics. All these are sentences and these things, right? Just a matter of 2 weeks, we'll try to understand. Okay. I thought of like inserting some pictures like teddy bears and all these things, but that won't work. No, I should like maintain a standard. No, this is a like SEMA class, like economics, that I should maintain this. That's why. So in my previous, like for my F1 class, you might see here I have like all the social media icons here in front of mine. All the social media icons. I mean, the social media I know, right? Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, YouTube. Everything. So even I removed that diagrams also. Why? I should maintain the standard, no guys. This is economics and likewise. So can't help reading. So listen. So I'll make it as interesting as possible to make it as a story so that you will remember. Maximum another 2 weeks, right? Then work for you, I'll be like looking at, because the maths part comes in. Investment appraisals and everything, right? So about trade cycles. Trade cycles basically 4, and remember that you have to remember very basically that has 2 basic intentions in terms of the government, as I say. Although there are a number of explanations for trade cycles, attempts have been made to combine the accelerator and multiply effects to explain the behavior. Something happens to boost the investment. For an example, innovation or what's the other word? What's the other word, guys? See, something happens to boost the investment. Example, innovation or war. So this is enough for you to understand why all the time US is coming up with this wars. Right? He wants Russia and Ukraine to fight. Then he wants all these Muslim countries and Israel to fight. Then yesterday it was like Thailand and Cambodia, We ain't fighting. Nobody fights with us. Right? Nobody fights with us, right? Imagine India fighting with us. Superb. So this is what? Why are they doing this? Boosting investment. Like creating trade wars all around. Right? So think of the economic impact. What's the economic impact, guys? By the way, imagine suddenly Israel goes and attacks Iran. So don't Israel know that Iran is that much powerful? Don't they know? I mean, just think. They know. They know that they have nuclear power, all this, that they will retaliate. They know. So when we start a fight with somebody, when we go and hit the bugger, they will definitely hit them. So don't these people know this? So what's all this then? Ultimately, who is penalized? Small countries like us. So they fight and then they say, no, we won't be giving oil to the entire world. So who ultimately suffers? Who us? We did nothing about it. I think some people did picketing saying stop the war here in Colombo, saying Israel, please stop the war. Some people did picketing. Don't know whether that was productive, but right? Things are like that, right? So the increase in investment triggers. Now, both the multiplier and the accelerator effect started with increasing national income, which was basically by investments. The increase in investment triggers the multiplier effect, leading to rising incomes. Rising incomes increase consumption, the same old story. Higher expected demand triggers the accelerator effect as firms invest further to meet demand. The extra investment then triggers a multiplier, again leading to rising incomes, and so on the cycle. Right? So don't be like worried. For these sections, domestic economy, this international economy and everything, I'll be giving you a separate short note as well, right? Because I know for a fact that you won't read this and study. Right? For these 2 areas only, I'll be giving a separate short note. What are the important areas, how to remember in a diagrammatic way towards the end of the session. So the extra investment, this means once the economy starts growing and will continue to grow, giving a strong upward swing in the trade cycle. However, this process cannot continue, right? Same thing. Okay. Right. Additional reading is for what, guys? Additional reading is what? For your parents to read. Do anything with that, I don't care. Right? You may read it. So we'll go to question number 4, 5 and onwards. Additional reading, give your mom to read. Leisurely, if she is like not having anything to do at home. And the next tute, it was like a disaster. Like, next tute, entire only sentences and paragraphs. You know what to do, but can't do. Question number 4, 5 and onwards. So I'm solely relying on only one textbook as per your syllabus when I'm like making these tutes, right? So there's another textbook which you need to like have some kind of an idea, which I'll be sharing, right? The important stuff in the other textbook, even I'll be sharing with additional reading tutes towards the end. So you have like completed almost 2 months. So July is over by next week. So when we meet for the next time, it's August, right? So another 2 months. So I'll be sharing all those videos and everything within the next 2 months. So be thorough in it, right? Whatever required for you to study from the other textbooks, I'll be giving you. Okay. So you don't have to read because like there are 4 subjects to deal with. Right. So what do they say? Which of the following is least likely? Least likely to result in a fall in investment. Fall in investment spending. Select. Which should result fall in investment, right? Those who say the answer is A, those are joining online, please just put answers in the chat box. So I can remember that in FS2 we did only up to cube 11 and we didn't do from question 12 onwards. Is it? Financial systems 2, didn't I complete the questions? Yeah, financial systems 2. Was there a tute called financial systems 2? There was, right? Okay. So just check whether haven't I? 12 onwards? No. So how many questions are there? Up to 18. All right. Right. I'll upload a PDF document for that. And what else have I missed? That is financial systems 2. Okay. Are there any questions? No. I'll upload a PDF document for that. Answers explaining. Thanks about it. All right, Tarini. This week I'll upload it. Okay, so here, those who say the answer is A, raise your hands. B, C, D. Right, okay. A is the answer, correct. So B, an increase in interest rates, what will happen? Increase in interest rates, borrowing will go up. So investments will become costlier and unattractive. An increase in rate of inflation, economic environment getting uncertain. So reduction in the availability of credit. So if you don't have credit, if you can't go for credit, all the investment spending will hold. Right? So explanations for these three. So as a result, answer would be A. Right? Moving to question number 5. Quickly do 5. How many questions do we have here? 5, 6, 10. 5, 6, 7, 8. Which of the following are included in aggregate demand? Indicate by ticking the appropriate box. Consumption included. Income, savings, investments. Yes, so included only if I tick. Consumption included, income no, savings no, investment yes. Aggregate demand. Okay. Question number 6. A leftward shift in the supply curve while demand is. All of a sudden supply curve, why is that? You also said that you will explain about Q3 in FS2. Q3 in FS2. For that also we don't have answers. Check. Q3 Financial Systems 2. No? You check. No? True false question part we didn't do. You gave the answers but no explanation. All right. Okay. That is Financial Systems 2 again. All right. Will do. Tomorrow I'll send it. I have it. I couldn't send it. Right. Okay, Vidusha. Okay. Right. I'll do whatever. Phase 2 we could, no? Financial Systems 2. Okay. Tomorrow you'll get that by evening tomorrow. Right? Okay. Here, supply curve question. Easy. Leftward shift in the supply curve. What's the like? How can I draw supply curve? Supply curve. Do you remember? Axis I will draw. Supply curve. Supply curve. This is what? Good. This is right. Okay. At least thanks to God. Right. Okay. Leftward shift in the supply curve while demand is unchanged. I'll draw demand as well. Demand unchanged. So leftward shift is this, to this side. Unchanged would lead to which of the following? But demand kept constant. Demand kept constant. Supply curve moving leftwards. So if you when you get the question like this, actually what you have to do is to draw this, right? Then select the equilibrium. So equilibrium was here. Second equilibrium is here. So what has happened? What has happened? Price has increased, quantity decreased. So now select. I think A is the answer, no? Rising prices and low output. So definitely what you have to do is to draw a diagram and see. Don't ask how can I draw diagrams in front of the, like in the middle of the exam. So anyway, from the mind at least. Right. Here you have consider the following information. So several components given. What are these components, guys? What are these components? What? Factors affecting price elasticity of demand. Then these factors. Yes? Yes? Only that I hear. Exposed investment savings. What are these 6 factors? Quickly. Factors affecting national income. Right? Circular flow of funds. Right. National income of this economy will calculate. You can calculate. You can segregate which one is injections, which one is withdrawals. What's happened? Quickly do. So in a national economy, right? If that is to be in equilibrium, planned what should be equal to planned what? Do you remember something like that? So if I am to say the national economy is in equilibrium, what should happen? Planned injections should be equal to planned withdrawals if that is in equilibrium. So out of these, select what are injections, select what are withdrawals, calculate the total injections, calculate the total withdrawals, understand which one is high, then decide on the count. Right? So I was telling you actually what to do. So just don't look at me. Then please do. Right? So what happens? Economy rises. Okay. So it was easy to remember, like injections, was it GIX, no? Injections was GIX and write it somewhere and keep, and then withdrawals were TSM, no? TSM was withdrawals. So total, and tell me total injections, what's the figure? 1000, 1010. Withdrawals 975. So which is injections is higher. So when injections are higher into economy, what would happen? When more and more injections are coming, not KLS injections. I mean, government investments, private investments, and everything. When those injections came, economy went down. But when these injections are higher, economy is increasing and growing, start to rise. Answer is B, no? Those who took answer B? Right. So clarifications, right from this end and keep, right? So injections is GIX, this is TSM, that should be equal. This one is high, this one is low. The clarification you may write down and keep. So one day when you are looking at the tube, you know how did you take the answer. Next one, the figures below show the consumption function for a given economy. Income given, consumption given. Value of the MPC in this economy. I can help. MPC is marginal propensity to consume. That I will help, right? So calculate. So MPC of can you calculate percentage change in consumption divided by percentage change in income, right? So here when you can see when income moves from 100 to 120, right? Consumption went from 95 to 110, right? So simply put together, MPC is, I'm writing, there's a mark of it. MPC is equal to percentage change in consumption, percentage change in, I can say Y, right? So here, look at. Income went from 100 to 120. Now, given all the information, don't go and look for everything, right? You just need percentage change. No? 100 to 120, income changed. With that, consumption changed from 95 to 110. So I can say percentage change in consumption is 15. Percentage change in income is 20, which is, this is equal to 0.7. Those who got that? Perfect. Okay, next question. Question number 9. Question number 9. A closed economy with no government sector. Really good country to live, right? Where there is no government, right? A closed economy with no government sector. Marginal propensity to consume. Remember, in the syllabus, you have marginal propensity to consume and marginal propensity to save, both, right? So be very careful. Marginal propensity to consume is 0.8 and a full employment level of 100 million. Full employment. The current level of national income is 80 million. To achieve full employment, investment must rise by. Give it a try. Give it a small try. So as far as I feel, it's just a matter of calculating the multiplier, right? So multiplier is equal to K. K is equal to 1 divided by 1 minus MPC. So put that, right? 1 divided by 1 minus 0.8, which is 1 minus 1 divided by 0.2, right? See here. K is equal to 1 minus 1 divided by 1 minus MPC. Correct? This is 1 divided by 0.2. Agreed? So this is what? 5. So the current level of national income is 80. To achieve the full employment, this should rise by multiply. Full employment level is 100 million. All right. To achieve 100, currently you have 80, right? Currently you have 80. To achieve 100 million, another 20. So if you put 1 rupee, that becomes 5. Just like that, if it is to become 20, you should put 4. Clear to everyone? How do we take 4 as the answer? Okay. Okay. Question number 10. Which of the following situations would lead to the existence of a deflationary gap? Deflationary gap we didn't discuss. Leave that question, guys. Deflationary gap I didn't discuss still. Leave it, leave it. Deflationary gap, I didn't discuss. Right, so we shall move on to the next part. Answer for Q7, is it question number 7? Answer, what's that? B. Right, question number 7, Vidusha, its answer is B. And Tarini for question number 9. Right, give me a second, guys. Question number 9. Right, question number 9 again, those who need. Right. So here the question is saying a closed economy with no government sector. So we understood about two linkages. First one was accelerator. Second one was about the multiplier. So they are asking full employment level is 100 million. If it's currently 80 million, what should be the propensity under this change? So the sole formula we had was multiply is equal to 1 divided by 1 minus MPC, because they have given MPC. If not, you can take MPS, which is 0.2. Okay, because like when there is no government sector, the sole withdrawal is savings. So as a result, MPC, if you have given MPS, you can say 1 minus this thing. So accordingly, we can calculate the multiplier is 5. So what do we need to do? We need to bring 80 million national income into 100 million, right? So 20 million gap. So if you put 1, it becomes 5. That is what the multiplier says. So to arrive at 20, you should insert 4. 4 into 5, which is the multiplier, enhancement by 20. That will reach 100 million. Clear? Not to you, I mean, Taring. He was the one who asked the question. You all were clear? Okay. This cute term, like, so sad about this, lot of information. Can't tell, we'll finish it quickly. Yeah? We'll finish it quickly. Okay, domestic economy, 2. Okay. Right. The domestic economy, this is the second part. We have another part left in domestic economy, small part, interest rate about that interest rate. And then international economy, and done with this, like difficult area. Okay. So the aggregate demand and the aggregate supply. Simply put together, what was aggregate demand and aggregate supply, guys? Aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Macroeconomic context, very good. So in the micro level, we discussed in individual markets, the demand and supply, how the equilibrium works, how the government intervention and everything we discussed. So this is macroeconomic context, the aggregate demand and the aggregate supply. Most governments put a real effort to prevent undesirable outcomes of the twin problems of inflation and unemployment. So what are the 4 basic problems? So what are the 4 basic pillars of national economy we discussed? 2 I can help with, unemployment and inflation. What was the other part? Growth, balance of payments. In any economy, 4 major pillars: growth, inflation, unemployment and balance of payment. That is what every government is trying on. Every government is trying on controlling these 4 pillars. Okay. So twin problems of this, to understand these economic policies, first we should see how those two arise in market economy. What was market economy? How many types of economies we do have? One is free market economy. Other one is command economy and mixed. What was command economy? Where the government intervention is so high, just like in North Korea, right? So free market means demand and supply, interaction between demand and supply decides on the market factors. So in a free market, I'm discussing, right? The circular flow model discussed previously showed how the total demand for goods and services in the economy was made up of several elements. You know now. 6 factors, you know. Then, together these made up the aggregate monetary demand or the aggregate demand. So, the consumption, investments, government spending, this is what? X minus N. Import exports or the balance of payments, right? So, X mean exports, in mean imports. However, an understanding of how the economic functions and why problems. So, you may remember this, right? How aggregate demand forms. There was a question previously to think what are the factors coming under the aggregate demand. So, this consumption, investments, government spending, and differential in import export. So, however, an understanding of how the economy functions and why problems may occur cannot be explained solely in the terms of demand for goods and services. We need to know about the ability of the economy to produce as well. That's true. Just like in an individual market, we need to understand, just like the national income, how these magnificent stuff came up, just like in the accelerator and the multiplier, when national income increased, what happened? You saw. But just like that, similarly, in the parallel manner, aggregate supply is also important. Because when the national demand is there, definitely the supply should also be there to become the equilibrium. So firstly, we look at the aggregate demand. In the circular flow model, aggregate demand was related to the level of national income and the level of national expenditure, important national part, put together whole as a whole. In the aggregate demand and supply model, it is related to national income. This makes a possible discussion of the origin of both unemployment and inflation. Now, out of these four pillars, right? We learnt about the growth, right? We learnt about the growth, how economic growth can be induced, how economic growth happens, how it accelerates, how it deviates, how trade cycle happens. Actually speaking, we discussed about the growth factor in real detail, right? In macroeconomy. So the next factor we are going to focus on is about unemployment and inflation both. So, it is assumed that aggregate demand, it is made up of all the components of expenditure in the economy. You know that what is included under the aggregate demand is inversely related to the prices, since a price fall would raise everyone's real purchasing power, wealth, and thus tend to raise spending. So what will happen if if the price of the national output decline? Imagine national price level of outputs decline. What will happen? So if you eat like 1 carrot, you will eat 2 carrots. Because governments consider you are supposed to be rabbits for the government. Carrots every time. 1 carrot, 2 carrots next time. So if prices fall, imagine a basket of goods, consumables, right? Price level fall, what will happen to the spending power, purchasing power of the people? Same on salaries, you can purchase more. That's what. So if you eat 1 carrot, the next time you can eat 2 carrots. Small rabbits. Okay. So accordingly, everyone's purchasing power, wealth, and thus tend to increase spending. May shift if any one component changes to the multiplier effect. Now remember, for a very long time we discussed changes in the demand curve. Remember? On the demand curve movement, how did that happen? Because of what change? Price change. Shifts in the demand curve? Conditions. Similarly, for the aggregate demand, you know what are the conditions or what are the factors included in aggregate demand, right? So these are the factors. made up of all components. See this sentence: consumption, investments, and government expenditure and exports. Aggregate demand is consisting of this. So if one of these components change, what will happen to the aggregate demand curve? Just like the demand curve, there should be aggregate demand curve. So what will happen to the demand, aggregate demand? AD curve. That will what? That will shift. Not talking about the change in price, right? Change in components. So aggregate demand would shift. Clear? Right. Next part. Thus, the aggregate curve plotted with price on the vertical axis and the quantity demanded on the horizontal axis slopes down from left to right. Should be left to right, but may shift. Same on a design, right? The demand curve, just like the demand curve, but it will shift. Then moving to aggregate supply. The aggregate supply in an economy refers to, you may highlight, aggregate supply is willingness and ability of the producers in an economy, largely the business sector, to produce and offer for sale goods and services. So aggregate demand means consumption, investment, and all these things. Aggregate supply means what? Willingness and ability of the producers. What's the limiting factor? Resources. Producers cannot manufacture up to the level they need, right? They can't do it. But why? Resources are. So willingness and the ability of the producers in an economy, largely the business sector, to produce and offer for sale goods and services. Okay. Next part. It is assumed that the aggregate supply is the collective results of decision made by business producers, large and small, to sell goods and services. So this is all about goods and services putting into the market, right? Is positively related to the price level since important. This is positively related. Previously, aggregate demand was negatively related. Why aggregate demand is negatively related? So when price levels decrease, everybody tends to spend more. But aggregate supply, why is it positively related? Yes. So this explains why every other things kept equal, a rise in price level will make sales more profitable. So that I discussed when I'm discussing the supply curve. The supply curve was just like an increasing trend. Why? When the prices increases for the producers, they find it more profitable. So as a result, they try to produce and produce more. Similarly, in the aggregate supply, same happens. Profitable and thus encourage businesses to expand the output. But they cannot expand the output as to what they need because why? Limited by the availability of resources, factors of production, so that at full employment, output cannot be increased any further. Right? Imagine if full employment is reached, national level, everybody is employed. Unemployment is zero. Even if that level comes, you can't increase the supply anymore. Why? You don't have resources. Clear? So as a result, the demand curve, just as we draw for individual markets, similar shape, but the supply curve is not the same. Right? You will find it. I'll show you. Aggregate supply curve is a bit different. Right? What's the reason? Now, after an eternity, don't call me. So, supply curve was like that. Why aggregate supply curve? Don't ask me because why? Limited by the availability of resources. Can only shift in the long run as the result of the change in cost of production or in the availability of factors in production. Thus, the aggregate supply curve slopes upward from left to right and does not shift in the short run. Important, does not shift in the short. Okay, basics, right? So you may have your break and come. Afterwards, I'll discuss about the equilibrium, right? National equilibrium. Okay. Have your break and come 20 minutes. We'll discuss about the equilibrium afterwards. Okay. Say okay. Are you tired? I'm asking because I'm not tired. Like I feel totally okay. You right, go. Have a walk, drink some water, and do anything you need and come. This question number 2. Given the reasonable assumption that the level supply curve. Now, small confusion. For this to be in equilibrium, I said right, we'll start. So we were discussing about the aggregate supply and the aggregate demand, right? So just like the individual demand and the supply did, aggregate supply and the aggregate demand is also in equilibrium when it comes to the national income and the national levels. So national equilibrium will be there. The aggregate demand curve intersects with the aggregate supply curve. Now, small confusion. For this to be in equilibrium, I said aggregate supply and the aggregate demand should be equal. Then where was that planned injections and planned withdrawal should be equal? What's that? That again equilibrium. What's your interpretation about that? I said for the equilibrium to be there, planned injections should be equal to planned withdrawals. Did I say that? Right? Actually, I did not. Economists, previous. Right? There should be something like that. But that is in terms of the money supply. Money. Flow of funds. In terms of flow of funds, remember planned injections should be equal to planned withdrawals. But in the supply and curve, in the supply and the demand, just like the individual for the individual markets, here also aggregate demand should be equal to aggregate supply for that to be in equilibrium. Secondly, here the total demand for goods and services in the economy is equal to the total supply of goods and services in the total demand. Total demand for goods and services is equal to total supply for goods and services, which is what you called aggregate demand and aggregate supply. The particular value of this model is that it demonstrates the effect of changes in either aggregate demand or aggregate supply on both the level of national income and on the price level. Given the reasonable assumption that the level of employment, now we are discussing about employment and inflation, right? Employment and inflation, because we have discussed about the growth. Now it's about employment and inflation. Given the reasonable assumption that the level of employment in an economy is in the short to medium run is function of the level of national income, the model can show how inflation and unemployment might arise. This is level of employment in an economy in the short to medium run is a function of national income, which is what? National income level parallelly decides the employment level also. So increasing the national income of a country means, imagine if almost all the people are employed, that is increasing national income. Why? Increasing national income leads to consumption, everything that we can see. Imagine the population is 1 million, 500,000 is only employed. Is there a point? So as a result, so the national income would be less. So national income is a function of employment. When we are discussing, I'll explain. So both linked very closely. Okay. Next part. Changes in aggregate demand. See, so this is what I told you. Look at this diagram. What happened to that? Okay. So originally, for theoretical purpose to study, although we considered demand and supply curve is also is a curve, right? It's not like a straight line, but to learn and to understand the gradient and all these things only, we considered it as a straight line. So here, aggregate demand I can say about that, but the aggregate supply is having a considerable curvature. So we can't consider that as a straight line because of the fact, although we can increase and go, that is limited to the availability of resources. So this is the aggregate supply curve and about the aggregate demand curve, right? Consider a point, initial equilibrium at P1, Y1, P1 and Y1, just like Y1 and get 1, P1 and Y1, right? P1 and Y1 is the equilibrium point here. So imagine what happens because of some reason aggregate demand increases or decreases. Can happen. So if the demand curve, aggregate demand curve moves to this side, that is a rightward shift. So this is aggregate demand has increased or decreased? Increased or decreased aggregate demand? What? Those who say increased? Those who say decreased? Right. This is increased, right? So aggregate demand increase. You know, how can you decide on that? Select one point, Y1, and select another point here. So when it comes to this place, output has increased. Right? So consider P1, Y1 is the initial equilibrium, and then P2, Y2, if the after the change in aggregate demand to AD2, right? Look to the symbols, AD1 to AD2 aggregate demand changes. So as a result, equilibrium point changes from Y1 to Y2, P1 to P2. How about the change? P2 minus
Elastic.
P1?
Elastic.
Last. Okay, yes. In a way, P2 minus P1, Y2 minus Y1. Which one is big? I mean, look at simply here. P2 minus P1 is a small area, right? So Y2 minus Y1 is big, which is what? When you change the aggregate demand due to some reason, I'll be telling it, due to some reason, when you change the aggregate demand at this stage of the supply curve, at this stage, okay, at this stage, the change in output is high, whereas the price change, I can say a simple word for price change as what? Employment. Price change? Price change, changing price, increasing prices, inflation. Is it? Price change is small, whereas change in output is big. If you are the government, that whatever happened, but if you are the government, that is good or bad? If you are the government, if you have the authority as the government, this is good or bad? This is good. Why? Using a small change in price. Now all this happens, why? I change the aggregate demand. So how can I change the aggregate demand? One thing is as the government, I can do a government spending. I increase the government spending, which is what I'm dumping more and more money into the general public. So what happens? People have a lot of money. Consumption increases. As a result, aggregate demand increases. So now aggregate demand increase from AD1 to AD2. Understood? So when the aggregate demand increases, output increases, but with a small change in price. If the government is trying to achieve full employment, this is good. Why? Inflation kept at a lower level and even you are increasing the output. That is good. Now think of this part. Think of that part. I mean here, this part. That part means this, right? So Y3, initial equilibrium is Y3, it moving into Y4, right? So change in price is high, change in output is less. So in the government's perspective, at this level, at this situation, doing government spending is good or bad? Increasing the aggregate demand is good or bad? Bad. Why? Output changes very small, but price change is high, which will lead to inflation. Clear enough? Can you interpret the diagram? Right. Now we'll read. Okay. Now I have given you lots of information because this tube, I don't actually like it. Lot of information, but can't help because you should have something to read. So the interpretation of the diagram I have done. Okay. Now we'll go and read. Suppose that the economy is initially at the equilibrium at a level of national income equivalent to the national output and employment denoted by Y1. If there was an increase in aggregate demand, right, I can't just change it. Okay. So AD1 to AD2, you saw the scenario number 1. So the new equilibrium would be at national income level Y2. National income would have risen from Y1 to Y2 and unemployment would have fallen. So you saw in the scenario number 1, imagine output increased, price increase is less, output increased in a bigger manner. So when the output increases, what happened to the unemployment? Unemployment. So in a national economy, imagine you can't like increase the national output, so you can't bring down robots and do it. So anyway, manual labor, so unemployment will reduce. Unemployment will reduce. Why? Because the output is increasing. To match that, unemployment is decreasing. So the price level would have risen from P1 to P2. In this case, most of the effect of the increase in aggregate demand is felt in the form of rising income, good, rising income, and employment generated by the increased national output from Y1 to Y2, right? So when this happens, output increases, unemployment reduces. As a result, what will happen to the national income? When unemployment decreases, national income increases. So again, coming back to the same story of accelerator and multiplier and economic growth. Understood? Right. Then there is only a small inflationary impact. Small inflationary impact, a small average price rise. Thus, in this case, if the government wish to reduce unemployment and expansion of AD by reducing taxes or by raising government expenditure. So see, I told you, I tell you how to do it. How to change aggregate demand, right? So two methods, reducing taxes, raising government expenditure would be an appropriate and effective policy. So reducing taxes to boom the economy and raising government expenditure is good. Right now, how to do that? It's a separate lesson. Next part. right? So you might feel, how can you do this practically? Reducing taxes means government revenue goes down. Then you have to increase government expenditure. So if you have to increase government expenditure, you should have taxes, have revenue. No? So how to do this? Next lesson. For now, how to change aggregate demand, learn part by part. Clear enough now? Scenario number 1. Next, scenario number 2. Suppose that the economy is initial, now the second part in the diagram. Suppose that the economy is initially at equilibrium at a level of national income and employment denoted by Y3. If there was an increase in aggregate demand from AD3 to AD4 in the latter part of the supply curve, the new equilibrium would be at Y4, national income Y3 to Y4, unemployment would have fallen, true, because why? Output increases. Even small output increase. So unemployment has gone down. The price level would have risen from P3 to P4. It's a big jump, right? So inflationary, this thing is high. Okay. So next, in this case, most of the effect of increase in AD, aggregate demand, felt in the form of a rise in the price level, large increase from P3 to P4, and there is only a small effect in raising the national income. Output, smaller increase, but the price levels increased a lot, which has created the inflation as generated from this and reducing unemployment. Thus, in this case, government attempted to further reduce unemployment by expanding AD. The effect would be very small. So, if in the supply curve, the government decides to reduce the unemployment in the second scenario, that won't meet the target. Why? When you try to increase the output and reduce the unemployment, there comes inflation. Clear enough? Right. So you should maintain in the supply curve, in the initial part only you should do that. That's what this is explained. Right. So thus the government attempted to further reduce AD effect would be very small and the price would be significant increase in inflationary pressure. Significant increase in the inflationary pressure. Indeed, at this point, AS curve, AS means aggregate supply curve, becomes very steep because the economy is approaching full employment, right? So why the supply curve is showing that kind of a curvature is because of this. Approaching full employment. We have discussed. When you meet the full employment level, there's no point whether you have resources. When you don't have resources, there's no point of reaching full employment. Both the factors linked. So approaching full employment, a more appropriate policy for the government here might be to restrain AD by raising taxes, reducing government expenditure. At that scenario number 2, right? So shifting aggregate demand for AD4 to AD3, which is what? Initially, what happened was aggregate demand was taken to this side, right? But the appropriate policy at that point is to bring the aggregate curve to downside, right? So keeping some level of like unemployment, you can keep the inflationary pressure at a targeted level, right? So that's why when I was explaining the inflation and the unemployment, I very basically told you that there is no country where the unemployment is zero. You can't do it, right? You can't bring unemployment into zero, which is you can't provide 100% employment. If that happens, what would happen to inflation? What would happen to inflation if that happens? Inflation might go up. Why? If everybody is having it's bad, right? So anyway, any country should try to give employment to everyone, but not practical. When everybody is having the same on income, imagine, right? Everybody in the class is a millionaire. Theoretically. Right? A millionaire. I don't know when you have thousands what to say. So the least figure I know is millionaires or like country to say. million a year. So what would happen? Each of our purchasing power is equal, right? If you go to Shangri-La, I will go to Cinnamon. Or if not, I will fly some other country, right? So everybody's purchasing power. There's no change, right? No differentiation in purchasing power. Everybody has equal amount of money. So what will happen to the inflation then? Increase. Why? Everybody demands for the same thing. But that has created, so differentiation in this purchasing power, right? Differentiation in this purchasing power has kept inflation at lower levels, right? When somebody argues with me to go to Shangri-La for lunch, I will not. I can't afford it. No demand for Shangri-La lunch, you go to hell and eat, right? I can't. So if everybody has money like that, then what would happen to the demand? We'll have to take these desks also to Shangri-La. The demand is so high. Understood? Clear? So as a result, 100% employment will not be maintained. So if that maintains, another problem comes inflation. Right? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Now, I mean, every economic theory we are explaining on a theoretical basis, right? So you can think that in different aspects. Originally, the government should be trying to bring 100% in. But on the other hand, the same own government can't do that. If they do that, every government tries to maintain a flexible inflation target. So can they maintain inflation target? So then demand push inflation might come into play. So originally we should try. Now we can't say, can the government in their presidential propaganda, can Andhra Kumar say, I will try to maintain unemployment at 10%. Right? Can he say? But originally, that there should be some kind of unemployment. Because why I'm saying unemployment is not like having a single job. People do move. Because of that also unemployment happen. Right? People change jobs. So for like 3-4 months, they don't have a job. Twice they can make. What you say is true. Okay? All good, guys. Right. So shifts in the aggregate demand curve may occur for reasons other than government policy. Important. Right? The sole reason for the aggregate demand curve to change is not government intervention. Right? A recession characterized by falling output and unemployment and reduced inflationary pressure, will result from a leftward movement in the aggregate demand curve caused by, among other things, a fall in the investment of business confidence system. So reasons, right? I have given you reasons where aggregate demand fall. Okay. So a fall in investment if business confidence is damaged, a fall in consumer expenditure if consumers lose confidence or if they reach the limits of their ability, a fall in exports if there's a major loss of competitiveness. Right? What's the position of US considering the third factor? Think of their economy. What they say is a fall in exports if there is a major loss of competitiveness or there is a recession in the country's major trading partners. What were they trying to do actually? Putting reciprocal tariffs. That was at a failure, true. What did they target? Yes, obviously correct. Reduce exports. Then their products. So will that boom the economy? What's your opinion? Now you know some kind of economics, right? Think US president wanted to put tariffs on every person. right? We only gave a call and negotiated, then we end up paying 30%. The other countries could, right? So why did they do? Why did he do that? You think he's so foolish, he don't know he's such an idiot? You think like that? That's not. So by putting pressure on international trade, what will happen? Nobody can actually export to US. Tariffs are so high. Tariffs are so high means what happens? So imagine we send a whatever the clothing item you select, right? I can't tell you the clothing items we are exporting into US, right? To be honest, so you think yourself, right? Okay, we are sending it to US. Imagine 100 rupees, one. Lot of tariffs, and then we'll particular exporter from our country will have to sell that for 1,000 rupees there. 10 times. So what will happen to the demand for our products in US? Demand will what? Will decrease. Accordingly, they will shift into the products which is being produced in their country. So they came up with reciprocal tariffs just to minimize exports, right? He said, anybody who wishes to manufacture and produce in their country, please do come. Zero taxes, guarantee. So if Mars and Brandix and all these people try to go and establish a manufacturing facility there in US, come. Zero tax. So what did he try to do? What did he try to do actually for US? Every production happens in US for their consumption. That will give the nation jobs, employment increased. What will happen to the price of the products? Will go down. Then ultimately what will happen to the inflation? Will go down. So it's a massive plan. He is not an idiot, right? I don't know in this aspect. He might be, but in this aspect, right? Now do you understand? Now when you're like looking into those news guys, like you are economics students, so think. Oh, so he has reduced the taxes, no? He has increased the taxes, no? That's it. So don't think what's behind. What are they trying to do? Right? So it was a major problem like China increasing and then US people increasing and then India saying something else. No impact to Russia. Why? He don't care. Because he is not importing, he is not exporting to US. He don't care. And 1/4 of the world is Russia. Like, imagine. So that's these things are important. These are economics, right? So all this time, global power was vested with US and Europe. Trust me, by 2030, 2035 maximum, that will turn around. Asia is the rising power. Okay? Asia is the rising power. So no longer Europe or US would be considered as global powers. Why? See the Asian powers, Chinese economy. I've told you, no, right? Out of the 5 biggest banks in the world, 4 are Chinese. So imagine the amount of dollars being retained in China, US dollars. Trump can't do anything to China. Why? Majority of the dollar reserves are in China. Rest is in India. So Russia, India, Japan, all Asian nations. So that's, look for the articles. You have got like rising Asia, right? Rising Asia, right? So bigger Asian powers coming into play within the next 10 to 15 years. Right? That would happen. I don't know. We won't live. That would happen. So all these things are linked. So remember these things with the practical examples. You won't ever forget. Right? At least the example. Right. The next part. I think it's clear. Likewise, the economy may expand and experience a period of business boom characterized by rising output and employment and increasing inflationary pressures, considering if the rightward movement in the eddy caused by among other things. So consider now, reading all this, remember what are the factors which would lead to a rightward shift in the aggregate demand and the leftward shift in the aggregate demand. That are the things you need to, right? So reading this can't help, but remember all this system. So changes in aggregate supply. Now we understood the changes in aggregate demand, how the aggregate demand curve might move. This is aggregate supply. It is also possible that in the longer run, the aggregate supply in the economy might change. This is shown in the shifts in the aggregate supply curve. Look at this now. How can you interpret? When it comes to AS1 to AS2, aggregate supply has increased or decreased. AS1 to AS2. Increased or decreased? Increased, decreased or confused? 3. Yes. 3 options now. Aggregate supply AS1 to AS2. Increased, decreased, confused. Decreased. Right. AS1 to AS3. Increased. All right. So the demand curve remained the same. Right. Demand curve remained the same. Right. Aggregate supply moves from AS1 to AS2, which would lead to national output or else income or employment or equal, moving from Y1 to Y2, decreased, right? When the supply curves decrease, Y1 to Y2, how can you interpret? How can you interpret? It's quite simple, right? So when the supply is reduced, simple, that in the economy, employment, all this output goes down. So imagine 5 factories manufacturing a product and 1 factory closes down. So the supply would go down. So accordingly, national output, national income, employment, everything goes down. The other way, AS1 to AS3, which should move A1 to Y1 to Y3. Right? Now think about the price factor. Price. What has happened to the price? Y1 to Y2, here Y1, Y2, what has happened? Price has increased. How can you interpret that? How can you interpret that? Output has fallen, demand remained the same. As a result, what will happen to the price? Price would increase. Inflation, no? Inflation, no what? Inflation. Price has increased. We call it stagflation, another name. Right? Stagflation is when the output is given the same demand, when the output is reducing, price is rising, that instance is called stagflation. Clear? So when Y1 to Y3, price reduces, right? So we'll see now. Now look at here. The economy might suffer from supply side shocks. Supply side shocks. One such example is a natural disaster, right? All the raw materials gone to manufacture. You can't manufacture, supply goes down. So the economy might suffer supply side shocks, which reduce the ability or willingness of productive businesses in the economy to produce and sell goods and services. If this occurred, the aggregate supply would shift to the left. See, when the supply is reducing, aggregate supply curve moves to the left. Left means it's like upwards, okay? This way. from AS1 to AS2, the result would be a rise in the price level from P1 to P2 and a fall in the output from Y1 to Y2. Output falls, price increases. This combination of falling output and rising inflation is stagflation, underline. This combination of falling output, rising inflation is referred to as stagflation. Decreasing output, right? Increasing price level. Understood? That's it. Supply side shocks might arise from. So several examples for supply side shocks. This I've given. Major rise in energy and raw material prices. A major rise in labor costs. The problem of many European large economies. A significant fall in productivity in businesses due to major technological problems. Technology. Right? Technological problems. A global pandemic, just like COVID-19, or else a natural disaster whatsoever, which will affect the supply side. Those are known as supply side shocks. Right? So again, tell me what would happen if a supply side shock happens? If a supply side shocks. So when the COVID-19 came, what happened? Supply went down. As a result, output reduced, price increased. That is known as stagflation. Clear? Perfect. So the next example, the economy might also experience a rightward shift. The second part, United States currently has an unemployment rate of 4.1. Yes, even with UK, it's 4 somewhere around 4%. UK, I don't know. All right. So the economy might also experience a rightward shift in the AS curve, such as AS1 to AS3. This would produce a highly beneficial result that national income and employment would expand from Y1 to Y3, which is when the supply curve, aggregate supply curve increases. Let's say due to some reasons, like the reasons are listed here, right? Due to some reasons, governments giving grants and like lot of stuff. If the supply increases, employment levels also increases. Output increases. As a result, prices fall. Given the factor, demand remains the same. Right? Demand remains the same. So, favorable developments in the economy, deliberate government supply side policies designed to shift the S curve to the right, such as privatization, business tax reductions, and labor market reforms. Privatization. Good topic, right? So, during our recessionary period in the previous few years, we tried to sell everything, right? So, President was Wickremesinghe. Isn't it? President Biden was Wickremesinghe. So, as a result, he tried to sell everything, the national carrier, Sri Lankan Airlines, port to the Adani Group, whatever possible, sell. If he can, he will sell wisdom and entire we all too. So, why privatization? The state-owned enterprises, you might have heard, right? State-owned enterprises. He tried to sell. Why? Reason is here. If you understood, now you can interpret. That was not his sole intention, I don't think. Inefficiencies was there, definitely, yes. Agreed. Yeah. By doing this, what happens? Theoretical. What happens to the aggregate supply then? When you are selling, when you are privatizing. State-owned enterprises, when privatized, what happened? The same amounts, imagine entire train system in the country sold to somebody else in India or where. Do you think you can take the same on train ticket at the same price? Do you think? Definitely. Price levels would demand decrease. Demand would decrease, price levels would increase. What will happen to the national income levels then? That's the point. What will happen to the national income levels? When the demand goes down, definitely income goes down, true, but not for the government, for the privatized parties, those who purchase. Governments get money by selling. With that system, you can simply increase the national income. You saw, to have economic growth, the best thing you can do is to increase the national income, right? But the best method is not to sell our stuff. Remember. True, I agree that you should increase the national income, but not by selling our stuff. Right? So what did he try to do? Increase the national income overnight by selling all this. So when national income increases, true, economic growth happens. I understand. But in the long run, what's the impact? Everything is privatized, we own nothing. Clear? Now you understand? What? What do you understand right now? What the previous president did. Okay? Now don't go and tell any of this at home. Huh? So because like, you know, your parents, including mine, are really extremely into those people, previous governments and everything. So don't go and explain, see, our lecturer told that this bugger has done this thing economically, this aggregate supply. If you are telling, explain the entire aggregate demand and supply, everything. Then okay, right? Don't tell only this part to your parents. That I told that, you know, he has done this thing, no. Amma, see what has happened, our aggregate supply has happened, this and this. She will kick you out, right? If you are telling, tell the entire, take the tute and show graph and everything. If not, don't tell. You understand and keep. Next part. Monetary and the fiscal policies are primarily concerned. I have tell like 101 times monetary and fiscal policy about that. Monetary policy. Who is responsible? Who is responsible? Fiscal policy? Government. Fiscal policy is all about taxation. So concerned with influencing the level of aggregate monetary demand in the economy, in terms of the aggregate demand and supply model, these policies are aimed to shift the AD curve to the right. AD curve to the right. Now you understood that aggregate demand, changing or shifting the aggregate demand to the right is what the right thing we should do to boom the economy, right? So monetary and the fiscal policies also play a crucial role in that. They also help to move the aggregate demand to the right. We'll explain the next chapter. When the problem is unemployment, and to the left when the problem is inflation. So unemployment, inflation, when these twin problems is there, monetary policy and the fiscal policy also plays a role in managing it, right? However, concern or the effectiveness of such policies has led to a shift of emphasis towards supply side policies. But when you take the supply side shocks and supply side measures or strategies taken by the government, these are not that crucial because why? This will have some other impacts to the economy as a whole. So imagine like when you take the monetary policy, for an example, what's the basic aim behind monetary policy of a country? Basic aim. Yeah. All those are sub factors, but controlling ultimately the liquidity, market liquidity or the money supply of the country. That's true, right? But with that inflation, everything do change. So imagine, can you change the money supply or such a factor in a country just to manage the unemployment? You can't, right? You can't change monetary policy because to change the unemployment. That's what they say. This is managed using supply side factors, and at the last point, you can use this, but at the last, this has several significant importances rather than monetary and the fiscal policy. Okay. The object of supply side, see, the object of supply side policy is to shift the aggregate supply curve to the right. Right? Objective of the supply side policy is to shift the aggregate supply curve to the right in terms of the aggregate demand and supply model. This would have effect of raising national income. So aggregate demand curve, what should we try to do? Aggregate demand curve. We should move it rightwards or leftwards. Aggregate demand. I mean, to have an economic boom or economic growth or development, what should we do? We should move that to the right. Aggregate supply curve. Aggregate supply curve, what can we do? Again, moving into the right. Increasing. By increasing aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve, what would happen to the national income? Increase. So to have the economic growth as to what we learned under accelerator and multiply effect, what should we try? Increasing both these. Moving these curves into the right. That's all you need to understand. Is that clear? Clear enough? Okay. Supply side policies typically consists of a wide range of measures, the most important of which are supply side policies. Examples I have given: shifting taxation away from direct to indirect, reducing social security payments and tailoring them to encourage unemployed to seek the employment. This is important. We'll go one by one. I feel it's important. Shifting taxation away from direct to indirect taxation and reducing marginal rates of taxation to encourage work and enterprise. What will that lead to? Direct taxation is charging your employment, business profit. So what? Trying to charge more and more indirect taxes. What would that lead to? What will happen? Let's say VAT is an example of an indirect tax. So when you go to the supermarket, VAT percentage increase means everything increases. What will happen? What is the impact? Think from the deep-rooted levels. Definitely, when indirect taxes are increased, prices increase. Price increases means what will happen to consumption? Consumption decreases. Consumption decreases means demand decreases. See, so everything is linked, right? So it's just a matter of understanding which is the root cause. Secondly, reducing social security payments. Social security payments means consider like whatever the income tax or something given. So in foreign countries, like in UK, unemployed are paid a several amount of money, right? For a month, if that person is considered to be unemployed, that person is given an allowance, right? £1,000. You keep it and you leave, right? So if that is being encouraged, what would happen? Imagine if something like that comes in our country. I'll have 5 students in my CIMA class. Why? Everybody will stay at home and get that money. No, mean what to learn? You mad? Right? So what should the government should try on? Government should try to reduce that social security payments so that people will find it really difficult to live with that and will be motivated to go to work. Again, that will lead to what? If that is reduced, employment increases. Employment increases means what? Consumption increases, then that will lead to national income increases, output increases, and the same on story. It's like that McCarthy story, right? Do you know about that? McCarthy story, what's that? Yeah, after 2000, you don't know. Right? So there was a student just like you all, right? Who are in my class. So he he know about this Mecca, right? Now don't ask me who is that. A small insect. Consider, right? Whoever consider. So this student, that student can write an essay about that small Mecca, right? But ultimately, teacher came into the class and asked to write us essay about the cow, right? Now, how can I write? How can not I? How can that student write? That student don't know. So he like started the story like, so there's this cow. We even have a cow in our home. That the cow is tied into a. But by the way, it was written in Sinhala, right? It was written in Sinhala. I'm telling in English, right? So there's this cow. It's in our home that's tied into the coconut tree near to our home. We feed that cow every day, and likewise he told. Then he said, like, there was a Mecca on cow's back, and wrote the entire essay about it. Right? So this is like that. Understand the first part, whether national income or national output or whatever happens, then come to the Mecca's point where national income increases. That is Mecca's point, right? Then afterwards, everything is the same. National income increases means employment increases, blah, 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 blah. Understood? Not the story, I mean this. Right? You have heard that, no? Bad. Right. Third part, an emphasis on vocational education and training, similar stuff, right? So vocational training and education improve skills, improve like labor force, employment, again the same, right? National income and output and everything. Reducing the power of trade unions and employee organizations to limit entry into occupations and to raise wages above the equilibrium levels. So most of the companies, when you join, you might see there are trade unions, right? There are organizations which is created inside the organizations by the employees themselves for their well-being. So they start saying this salary should be brought to this levels, likewise lot of problems. So that power needs to be maintained at a particular level. They are the employment wages, which is maintained at static levels. Deregulation and privatization to encourage enterprise and risk taking. Sometimes in some countries, although we say privatization is bad, we can't say like it's 100% bad in countries like us. So Sudha people like gave the railway system back in like 1940, 1930s, 40s, that range. As I've told you, there was not a single development, a 2-meter development in the railway system for the past 77 years. So imagine if those systems are privatized, what would happen? True that we will have to definitely compensate, we'll have to pay higher prices, true. But about maintenance and the standards? Maintenance and the standard? Have you been to like a government bank and a private bank? Not telling it, right? So have you been to? I have personally been to, right? Not that because I'm working, because I've been to a public bank. Public means like UC, NSBO, likewise. Or a government institution, go to police. Or any other, like you have like divisional secretariats and anything. That's so bad, but trust me, it's so inefficient. Right? You will have to wait for like hours. You will have to take the lunch also and go to the bank so that you can get your work, eat there and come. That's how it is. But when it is privatized, can you do? Imagine if the railway system is privatized 10 years back. That will have some kind of standard, right? So even though it is like very expensive, right? So everything has pros and cons. Think in it in the perspective you need. In the perspective of the government, in the perspective of the long run, selling all these national stuff, state-owned enterprises, not good. But what our problem is corruption, right? And the problem is inefficiency. So in that perspective, it is good to say. So that at least that will be managed in a professional manner. Okay? Right. So however, supply side policies have had other less desirable consequences as well. Most significant of these have been making the taxation system more aggressive and whatever not required. Right? You may read it later. So that's all about aggregate demand and supply, the equilibrium and how that affects the national income levels. Right? So using the knowledge you gained, we shall do question number 1, 2. How many do you have? 3, 4. Yes. Question number 1, 2, 3, 4. Read, think and do. I do understand the number of questions we are like discussing is too less, right? For you to have necessary practice to go to the exam. But remember, we'll be doing a lot of questions towards the end. Right now, for every tute, like we have done only 10, 15 questions. That's not enough for you to get a proper practice to think. But in time to come, we should complete a certain area to come to questions. That's why we'll be doing. So don't worry. So there are a lot of like economic sites where you can get updates from, right? So do subscribe to them and see what's happening all around. So one such is World Economic Forum. So it has short videos every day being uploaded about what's happening. World Economic Forum is good. And then you have the newsletter from Eastland, Sri Lanka. Economy Next. And then the central bank site. So do subscribe them and keep, like, so it's not political, but what's happening all around, especially World Economic Forum, it's a good site. I have like very small videos, what's happening all around in the other countries. So do have an update. So all these times so like for an year, 8 times the central bank is having the monetary policy committee. So last week also they had one. So they announced what they have decided. What about the economy? Right? So these are the rates being given. So what do they expect about the inflation? What do they expect about the interest rates? Whether interest rates would go down, go up. Right? Be thorough enough with this. So that would add value to you. So in an aggregate demand and a supply diagram, if the aggregate supply curve shifted to the left, the consequences would be, what would happen? aggregate supply curve shifted to the left means aggregate supply has increased or decreased? Decreased. So what would happen then? Same demand, aggregate supply curve moves to the left. Draw and see. Yeah. Draw and see what could happen. I'm not going to draw, by the way. So those who say answer is A, B, C, D, yes. So national income is equal to output, right? So don't confuse, national income is output. So that will fall. Move to the left means equilibrium moves to this, output goes down, price will rise. C is the answer. Next question. Which one of the following would cause a fall in the level of aggregate demand? Factors affecting aggregate demand. You should be thorough. Fall in the level of aggregate demand. Answer A. Raise your hands. Only if that's correct, right? B, C, D. Yes. So a decrease in government expenditure directly affects. A decrease in government expenditure means directly the aggregate demand going down. Fall in the propensity to save, what will happen? Fall in the propensity to save means increasing the propensity to consume. Fall in the level of imports. Yes. A decrease in the level of income tax, more consumption. Okay. So answer is A. Question number 3. Question number 3. Which one of the following would cause the aggregate supply curve of an economy to shift to the right? Aggregate supply curve this time. Correct. Those who are joining online, please just put your answers in the chat box. Yes. Tarani, for question number 3, what's your answer? Yes. Okay. So which one of the following would cause the aggregate supply curve of the economy to shift to the right? Decrease in government expenditure? Not applicable. It's for the aggregate demand curve. Increased investment in new technologies in the industry? Correct. A fall in interest rates? Fall in interest rates? No. Lower unemployment? No. So answer would be B. Credit more cheaper. Yeah, would have some impact, but this directly links. This will definitely have an impact. Yes. So when interest rates are low, people would borrow more. So consumption would rise, as a result, demand would rise. Then ultimately that would happen, but it's a direct answer. Best answer selected. If not, you can argue. Okay. Question number 4. Good question, think and do. I'll give 1 minute. State whether each of the following would affect AD curve or AS curve, and state whether the curve would move to the right or to the left. You have to select whether this is coming under AD or AS, and then right or left. Think properly and do. Yeah. Question was asking. You do it, question number 4. In that A is directly affecting the aggregate demand, right? B correct, that's the answer. C, fall in interest rates basically affect aggregate demand. Here, lower unemployment, they say. Lower unemployment, I can say it's a direct consequence of that. It's not the root cause. Question is asking which one of the following would cause the aggregate supply curve to move to the right. So having lower unemployment will not cause this to move to the right. That won't happen. But this moving into the right will result in lower unemployment. Clear? Okay. Okay. So I'll put the answers here. You may note down. So I'm not going to explain one by one. So if you have any clarification required, you can ask. So I can't go and explain all the 6. Right? So this would be the answer. What's happening? Whether it's linked to AD, which is AD means Amrodisana. Aggregate demand, and then aggregate supply, whether that would lead to a rightward shift or whether that would lead to a leftward shift. You may note down, and if there's actually anything you can ask, but if not, I can't waste time explaining all this. The same on stuff, right? Can I proceed? Okay. Which one? An increase in tariffs on imported goods. Right. So imagine our country. A new tariff is being explained, a new tariff is being introduced for the imported goods. Imagine shoes. So what would happen by this? Out of which the supply curve or the demand curve would be affected. Why demand curve? So you might argue supply curve would affect, you might argue. So why do I say demand curve? When you put a tariff on whatever the goods you are importing, increase in tariff, what will happen to the imports? Yes? Imports, I'm asking. If the tariff is high, the people would buy less, so the imports would be decreased. So that will lead the what? Aggregate demand. So the demand would be what? By putting a tariff on imported goods, simply think the demand would be affected. Why? People will not buy. Imagine you having shoes locally prepared and imported shoes. Price of the imported shoes rise. So that will definitely affect the demand. So the aggregate demand. And then what will happen? Whether that will move to right or left? Aggregate demand. Yeah. Can argue like that. Aggregate demand. Price of imports. So I'm talking about the national income, what's prepared within the country. What will happen to that? Demand for that would increase. As a result, that will move to rightwards. Clear? Right. What else? A fall in business confidence due to political scandals. Right. So again, imagine the political system was so unstable previously, and as a result, what happened to the business confidence? When you say business confidence, what happens? What happened? So general public is having the confidence that this particular business would flourish. No. They will think because of these political these things, whenever the government might collapse or the business might collapse, so lack of confidence about the business. So that's why when the political instability was there, none of the investors from the foreign countries came. Nobody came. Even our own exporters didn't bring down money to the country. Why? Was not confident about us. So when the confidence due to the political scandals fall, right? Business confidence falls, that affects what? Right. Then aggregate demand will move to, that will reduce. Clear? Business confidence means we don't have a confidence that this business will give whatever the output to us in the near future. So thinking of that, we will not buy that. We will not consume. So as a result, its demand goes. Anything else? You can ask if you have. Anyone? So joining online even. Okay. So even after, if you have, you just ask, right? All right, then trade cycles. Trade cycles, this is the third time now I'm explaining. Firstly, there was a diagram, then about the trade cycles. Again, do we have about trade cycles? Or have I like duplicated it? Trade cycles. Right. Trade cycles, again, even I explained it today. Aggregate demand and the supply analysis has shown how the trade cycles of recessions, recoveries, and booms have followed by further recession, might occur. So I have given a detailed explanation about the every stage, right? So we'll take one by one quickly. Stage of the trade cycle, recession. Do you need examples? Recession? Recession? Economic recession, do you need examples? If you lived for the previous 5 years, no. Right? Recession, when a recession was there, you should remind, right? We were in fuel queues, like we were not having electricity for 4 to 5 years, 4 to 5 hours. And then what did we had? We had no food. And then we had to be in the fuel queues, gas queues. Recession. All explained? Right. See, falling outcome, queues, high and rising unemployment, yes, reduced inflationary pressure. Why? Because there is very less output, what happens? Prices of the goods increase, which is inflationary pressure. Improving trade balances as imports fall. So for the past 70 years, we didn't have a trade balance, right? Balance of payments. Why? We were importing and import. So when all the importations were restricted, our balance of payments became very narrow, right? So public finance will be adversely affected due to reduced tax, right? So the government can't charge tax also. No, the country is locked down. People don't have goods and services. So even you can't go and tax. They will kill the government. Actually, what they did, right? So next one, causes. What are the reasons, right? Falling domestic aggregate demand from lower levels of consumer spending, investment, exports, government expenditure. Falling domestic aggregate demand. Falling aggregate demand. Why does that happen? How come the aggregate demand go very down is national income going down. People don't have jobs, basically. Or else people don't have income. And if not, people have income but can't buy anything from them. Inflation was so high, right? Prices of goods and services so high. So as a result, what will happen to the aggregate demand after all? Reduces. So for a prolonged period, if the aggregate demand continues to reduce and reduce, that will lead to a recession. If not, world recession. Right? Can happen. Reasons. Policy response. Raise aggregate demand by reducing whatever. So it's like think like a doctor. So you have the root cause. What's the treatment? Opposite. So if this is due to the falling domestic aggregate demand, what do you have to do? Increase the aggregate demand. So what can you simply do? Can reduce the taxes, right? We can increase the national income by pumping out more money. That's what we did, right? Why do we went to IMF and ask for money? Why? What did we try to do by going? You know what IMF is? What is IMF? International Monetary Fund, yes. We went for extended fund facility and we requested $4 billion, by the way, right? So money pumping out to the local economy, to the money supply, national income increased, people start up growing little by little, people had little money. With that, taxes reduced, right? Importation restrictions lifted. That's how we did it. So raise the aggregate demand by reducing taxation, raising public expenditure, lowering interest rates. Didn't we do? For the first time in history, we had very low fixed deposit interest rates. It was ranging, now it's around 6-7%. Fixed deposit interest rates, right? But not the loan rates. Fixed deposit rates, right? Banks need to survive. So as a result, loan rates are high. Okay. Fixed deposit rates are low. So as a result, what will happen? Aggregate demand would increase. When fixed deposit rates are low, what would people do? They'll spend more. There's no point in saving. They'll spend more. So gradually increasing this. right? Recession. Secondly, stagflation. What was the stagflation? Stagflation, reducing output, increasing prices. So falling output, income and employment, rising inflation pressure. Supply side shocks, reducing aggregate supply. The reasons, causes. Supply side shocks, reducing aggregate supply. COVID-19, tsunami, right? Natural disasters, whatever. Supply side shocks could have a recession due to low aggregate demand combined with imported cost push inflation, right? So as a result, what can you do? Supply side policies to raise the aggregate supply. Don't pack up. Don't pack up. I'm finishing this and letting you go. Right? Stagflation. So what have you got to do? Stagflation happened because of the lowered supply. As a result, you need to increase the supply. Okay. Recovery. Output and the income begin to rise gradually. Now we are in a recovery period, right? Unemployment begins to fall. Everybody seems to have a job. Only moderate inflation. Inflation kept at very low levels, like 5%. And then improving public finance. Reasons for this, returning confidence in the businesses and sectors. That's true, right? Because of the newly appointed government and as the corruption is said to be kept at minimal levels, other countries and also the general public is having confidence. They think that they will do well. So that confidence has resulted in this recovery, right? Effect of government expansionary policy. So putting down money, all these things. Reduction in expansionary policy to prevent a too strong boom. So when at this recovery period, you can't expect to have this in a overnight, have this in a month. You can't do that. This should be a gradual process. So as a result, further expansionary policies like dumping more and more money is not good. That should be controlled. Okay. And the last one, it's the boom, right? Economic boom, it's getting the growth. So these are the features. Trade cycles, how these things happen. Right? Clear enough? Okay. So I'll stop at that point for today and we'll complete this next week. Right? So along with this international economy, we'll finish next week. And so this difficult part is done. Okay? Yes, yes. So when increase in trade union power and military, would AS curve shift to the left? Yes. Increase in trade union power would lead to decrease, yes.